Hello, and welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss mystical works of literature and how they relate to recovery. We hope you enjoy today's podcast episode.
Hello, this is Buddy C. Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you're new to the podcast, we are all in recovery. We all work some sort of 12-step program. And we have all realized that Taoist thought, the Tao Te Ching primarily, we're fixing to go into the Chansa though, Thomas Merton's translation or interpretation. We're on the 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching. We've got one more verse, then we'll go to the Chuanza. One benefit I want to talk about, resource. Of course, there's a lot of stuff at buddyc.org, but as far as the podcast goes, this is our 325th podcast. So you can go back through the podcast and get a lot of information or different topics. You may be able to find, I think on this verse, for example, we've probably talked about it, I don't know, 2 or 3 times at least. So you can get all kinds of other information based on, if you're looking for a particular topic, you could try searching that topic. Or if you're reading a verse and you want more information on that verse, all of our conversations, I think, are a little different because we don't go back and look at those. Oh, this is what we talked about last time. We want to discuss how they're speaking to us right now in this moment, how they're affecting us right now, not what we thought of them a couple of years ago. So, but I'm grateful for you guys. This is a big part of my recovery. I get so much out of our conversations. Okay, the 80th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Let's start with, Drew, let's just start with you, if you don't mind reading the Stephen Mitchell for us.
All right. If a country is governed wisely, its inhabitants will be content. They enjoy the labor of their hands and don't waste time inventing labor-saving machines. Since they dearly love their homes, they aren't interested in travel. There may be a few wagons and boats, but these don't go anywhere. There may be an arsenal of weapons, but nobody ever uses them. People enjoy their food, take pleasure in being with their families, spend weekends working in their gardens, delight in the doings of the neighborhood. And even though the next country is so close that people can hear its roosters crowing and its dogs barking, they are content to die of old age without ever having gone to see it.
Thank you, Drew. For those new to the podcast, we read several different translations before we actually start the discussion, just so we can see how different writers interpreted this verse. Sometimes we'll get some wide variances too. Oscar, you want to read us the Jonathan Starr?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Verse 80. Let every state be simple, like a small village with few people. There may be tools to speed things up 10 or 100 times, yet no one will care to use them. There may be boats and carriages, yet they will remain without riders. There may be armor and weaponry, yet they will sit collecting dust. The people must take death seriously and not waste their lives in distant lands. Let them return to the nothing of court. Let them enjoy their food and care for their clothing. Let them be content in their homes and joyful in the way they live. Neighboring villages are within sight of each other. Roosters and dogs can be heard in the distance. Should a man grow old and die without ever leaving his village, let him feel as though there was nothing he missed. Thank you.
Thanks, Oscar. Let's skip the Derek Lynn, if you don't mind, Brian. I don't see that much that's different there. Seems to be rehashing the same, more or less, unless you see something there that stands out to you. Or any of his comments.
Okay.
Sometimes he has good comments. So there's anything there.
What about your interpretation, buddy?
I haven't looked. Okay. Yeah, this could apply. I titled it True Contentment. You may travel for pleasure, knowing no location in the world can bring lasting inner contentment. You may have large houses and beautiful cars, knowing possessions are only borrowed and do not have real value. You may have a successful career and a high salary, knowing real success is found within. You learn to live in the moment, knowing freedom from yourself is the only source of real contentment. This freedom is a result of loving others through living a surrendered life. That's not a translation, that's just an interpretation. Anyone new, you can go to buddyc.org and download a free PDF of this book if you'd like. Let's just use the Stephen Mitchell as usual. I think it's close enough that we can pretty easy. If a country's governed wisely, its inhabitants will be content. So if they're not content, let's think of this as a person, as us. If I'm not content, I am not governing myself wisely. They enjoy the labor of their hands and don't waste time inventing labor-saving machines. Am I content with what I am doing, or am I always striving for more? This is a description of not being content, really, I think.
The first thing that comes to my mind visually with the enjoying the labor of your hands and not wasting time is I thought of cooking dinner. I cooked dinner last night, and sure we could have ordered delivery or takeout or popped something, quick and easy in a microwave to save time, to give me more time to, I don't know, do what, watch TV. What would that have gotten me if we had done delivery or takeout or something? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I enjoyed making dinner. I don't always enjoy making dinner, but I enjoyed it last night. I find when I keep my mind and my hands busy, keep them occupied, that usually puts me in a better spot. And of course, it was cheaper to make dinner, and it was healthier than what we would have gotten from somewhere else. And I know my wife always appreciates it when I make dinner, and it's just a win for me, doing some labor in the service of so many good things that come from it, and spending my time doing something that is good for me, rather than taking the easy way out and instead spending my time doing something that's ultimately probably pretty meaningless.
Thank you, Drew. It's not that inventing labor-saving machines is a bad thing. It's not that starting a new business is a bad thing. We could relate it to us. It would be, but it goes back to, does the success I am seeking, does the success hold me, or do I hold the success? Big difference there. Do I place my value on if I succeed at things or not? All of that points to a lack of contentment. We really got to look at that, I think, or I do. Why am I doing what I'm doing? You could read this and say, oh, well, that's BS. How, if you can make me, you just want to be dumb and do nothing kind of thing? You could read it that way and not see any way really to apply. If I'm working day and night to make time in inventions to save labor, and just for the sake of gaining if my self-effort is totally, if my effort is totally selfish and I'm totally looking at this thing from a point of discontentment, that's the problem. So he's given examples of that, I think. Since they dearly love their homes, they aren't interested in travel. It's not that there's anything wrong with travel, but am I traveling because I think that the traveling is going to give me peace that I don't already have? That's the issue with travel.
It reminds me of the Alan Watts quote, the only peace you'll find at the top of the mountain is the peace you bring with you.
Yes.
It's that inside job.
Yeah, Brian, that's really good because we can look at all of this as an external looking to bring the peace that's only found within. There's a story that actually is very applicable that Denmark Dennis that used to come some, he used to share, and I'm going to butcher the story. It's something to this extent. The gods said that they were going to give man this great treasure, but they were going to hide, they wanted to hide it though, so that it would be very difficult to find. So they said, where can we hide it that they can almost not find it ever? We could put it on top of the mountain, but they can climb any mountain. They'll find it. Another possibility came up. Hey, maybe we could put it at the bottom of the ocean. Eventually they'll find it there. Yeah, that's not really good enough. And then they said, hey, wait a minute. We'll just put it inside of them. They'll never look there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. We won't look there. We look everywhere else first. So I think this story, that's applicable to this story.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of these ways of going outside of ourselves with the work and with travel, with inventions, and as it goes on to talk about, there are a few wagons and boats, but these don't go anywhere. There may be an arsenal of weapons, but nobody ever uses them. All of that is looking external of me for what I can only find within. Then it flips and starts talking about the fruit of being content. If you're content, this is what it looks like, being content. Contentment's one of those, it's like peace. How can I tell someone has peace? For me, I look at peace as being in my mind, will, and emotions. And as a result, I have joy. Actually, there's Bible for that. Romans 14 talks about the kingdom of God, which is the rule of love in our lives, is righteousness, peace, and joy, and the Holy Spirit is the way the Bible says it. But for me, I could apply that. It's me having a right standing within, that I don't feel judged or condemned, or I feel good about myself. As a result, I have peace in my life. And as a result of peace, it's outwardly seen as joy. That's a three-tiered waterfall. When I'm full within, then I have peace in my mind, will, and emotions. And if that overflows, it goes to joy. So this is the same way. Okay, as a result, people enjoy their food. They take pleasure in being with their families, spend weekends working in their gardens, delight in the doings of the neighborhood. And even though, let me stop there for a minute. There's a quote from Solomon that even with everything that he had, they even went as far as, according to the Bible, piling silver up outside of the city and declaring silver worthless. He was that prosperous. With all of that, and he had, I don't know, 300 wives and 800 concubines. I couldn't do well with one wife much.
He had problems.
I don't. Anyway, all of that, and he concluded that it was all vain, other than enjoying the work of your hands and enjoying your meat and drink. In other words, enjoying what you're doing in this moment. The accumulation did not bring him satisfaction in life. And this is what this is talking about, I believe. Oscar?
Yeah, thank you. For me, it's the conscious contact with the higher power that establishes peace, whatever the circumstances are. So this is my main goal in life, to establish this being in the presence of a higher power. Or you can also, if you don't like God, or you don't like Tao, or you don't like consciousness, you can say being in the presence of the present moment. Because that's where I find it. And that's where I find contact with a higher power, and then the inner peace comes, and then the contentment comes. And it comes definitely with simplicity. It's actually, as soon as it gets complex, it's my mind that is striving for something, or not wanting something, or wanting something. Or it's fear, or one of all those, and they make it complex, and they are the voices in my head, and they say I have to do something, I have to grab my weapons, I have to go to another country, I have to holidays, I have to do a new business. But all those things I could also do in contact with a higher power. So it's not that those things are evil, those things are nothing. Like the silver of the King Salomo is nothing. It's just silver. It's nothing in itself. And when this complexity is going wild, and I call my sponsor to talk about this, because I don't talk with my wife about it, because then I'm too far, and then I get into trouble with my wife. I always get into trouble if the complexity comes. And I have conversation with my sponsor, and you can always break the conversation down to stay close to yourself. And this is the self with the capital S, which is the higher power. Stay close to yourself, keep it small, and keep it simple. Whatever the circumstances are. So the complexity of the circumstances don't matter in this. You can keep it simple everywhere, in all circumstances, in theory. And that's where I find contentment after 40 years of being discontent and striving and wanting things and fighting. So stop fighting, keep it simple, stay close to myself, close to my heart, and open and curious and honest. And then I'm at home. And then the metaphor is really nice of a village, and you just cook your meal and work in the garden. But it's really a metaphor. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you go on 1,000 holidays, or do businesses, or do stock market, or as long as this peace is kept, so the treasure which is inside. I really looked everywhere. I really looked at the bottom of the ocean and in the top of the mountain, but and finally I found this book, this blue book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which said, "Go within." And then I read Tao Te Ching again, and it said, "Go within." And then I read the Bible, and it says, "Go within." Suddenly I see everywhere it says, "Go within." That's where you find it. So it's really not that I couldn't know it. I could know it, but I didn't want to hear it or something.
Then we go from knowing it to being it.
Yeah, that's the next step, of course. Yeah, the theory is nothing. So
Have to live it.
yeah.
Thanks, Oscar. Brian?
What I was thinking about was step 3, and those words become willing, realizing that all this stuff doesn't fix Brian. Like Oscar said, you can go to the bottom of the ocean, but without that willingness, you're never going to find it. For me, I had to get to a point to realize that Brian's desires or fighting uphill every day wasn't working. So I had to stop and look around,
Give up the fight, right?
give up the fight. I was watching a show the other day about a guy that owns a huge software company, and those guys are obviously wired different, multi-billionaire, but they were just talking about what a hard charger. He could convince anybody that they needed something, and talking about, of course, all the stuff that he has. And I just kept thinking, I was like, man, is that guy happy? Really? If he gets up in the morning and looks at himself in the mirror, is he really happy?
Hmm.
Maybe he is. Maybe he but it's easy to get wrapped up in all that. Real easy.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
Drew?
Yeah, this, I think one thing this verse is good instruction on is battling FOMO, fear of missing out for us older folks. But the feeling that something better is always going on somewhere else. Staying at home on a Friday night thinking about how there's this party I wasn't invited to, or there's this bar that I know is really exciting, or we could be eating at this fancy restaurant, or looking at my bank account and thinking, man, I really need to get into crypto or NFTs, or I'm missing out on this stock that's going sky high. This verse is just all about, like y'all have said, just being content with what you have, being content with the present moment. And it's so hard to do that while you're scrolling through social media and seeing vacations that other people are having, them smiling on the beach, but you're not seeing the picture of them arguing in the airport and fighting on the plane or in the hotel room. Knowing that what's going on away from my house isn't as perfect as I assume it is. Being happy with what I'm doing right now, being happy with what I'm going to be doing in the future, being happy with what I've done in the past, and being thankful for having enough, and just spending my day in the garden, spending my day cooking dinner. That's enough. So like it said, just delighting in what's going on around me rather than wishing I was somewhere else or thinking about how things are better somewhere else. That's something that can just be, you can think about that stuff 24 hours a day and it just makes you more and more anxious and depressed. I really like this verse, just like Oscar said, just keep it simple. Focus on what's going on around you and what's going on within you, and then that's where your path to contentment will be.
Thank you, Drew. Fear of missing out. Yeah, thanks, Drew. I'm going to use that in the title, I think. Talking about describing all those ways of contentment and going as far as to say, even though the next country is so close that people can hear its roosters crowing and its dogs barking, they're content to die of old age without ever having gone to see it. Doesn't mean that they don't visit the neighboring village. That's not what it's talking about. It means that even though distractions are around you, or this is how I interpret it, distractions are around you, you know those things will not bring peace and joy. Every time the dog's barking, oh, I wonder what they're barking about. Let's go see. You know, all of that. What do they have I don't have? If I had that car, I'd be happy. If I had that wife, I'd be happy. You know, and then then you can either rationalize it and say, oh, whatever, or you can just stay out of that whole rationalizing game and totally shift to gratitude for what you have. Because even rationalizing for me doesn't bring peace and joy because I'm still looking at externals to change me within, change how I'm thinking. Externals do not change how I'm thinking, or they haven't mine. If they did change it, it wasn't for long. I had to have that interchange so that thinking diminished and I no longer felt it necessary to do all those comparisons. Well, what's the recovery saying, the AA saying for that? I compared others' outsides to my insides.
My
You say that,
insides.
don't you, Brian? That's one of your regulars.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's all I can do. I know how I feel within, and I'll look at others and judge how I feel within by what I see outwardly. That never works. That absolutely never works.
I think someone like Teddy Roosevelt said, comparison is the thief of joy. I like that.
That's good.
Buddy, you mentioned the gratitude list. One thing I try to add in mine is if it's something that I'll add in there, hey, I'm grateful to have been paid for an invoice today. And I always tell myself, thank you, it is enough. I just try to send that energy out there. Or if I get an order, because I can real quick say, why can't it be $1 more? Woe is me. And I just have to tell myself it's enough. It always has been and it always will be.
I can complain about anything, Brian.
Me too.
Way before I was in the program,
Yeah.
I sold a house and I was fussing because I couldn't keep the zeros straight in my checkbook because there were too many zeros.
Mhm.
I'm like, there's something wrong here. Why am I fussing about having too many zeros in my checkbook? This is back in the 90s. I was a kid, just it wasn't a whole lot of money, but it was enough that in one of the little small pocket checkbooks, you couldn't keep it all straight. I think it was 20, 30,000 or something. And so I realized then that there was something wrong with how I was looking at. I didn't know the answer, but I could see there was a problem because this is not a time that I should be fussing about anything, but it was still there. That discontentment.
One thing I'll try to do in those situations, to use Brian's example of the invoice coming in, that the order came in, you wish it was for a little more, is to think about how many people out there would love to get the order that you just got. The problem that I have, how many people would actually really like to have that problem? I'm sure in Brian's line of work, he can think of a bunch of people who would love to get that order he got and would probably be happy if it was even less than what he got. Being thankful for what you got, realizing that a lot of people would do whatever they could to get that thing that you wish was more, puts me in a little bit more humility perspective, which is what I often need.
And Drew, maybe you come to some point, or we come to some point to where it's irrelevant what order we got or how many zeros are in the bank, or we know that those things, number one, are not our source. Number two, they don't bring the peace and joy when I overvalue them. If I look to them to bring me peace and joy, if I look to a relationship to bring me peace and joy, I'm going to find something wrong every time because I'm overvaluing. Goes that for anything external of me. I put unreasonable expectations anytime that I'm doing that is a mistake. It's not going to bring me what I'm looking for.
Why did I go on this overseas vacation for 2 weeks and come back, and I'm the same person I was before I left. Whose fault is this? Was it the airline's fault? Was it the hotel's fault? Was it the fault of these people I ran into on the street? That's expecting too much from outside sources, to me, usually gets me blaming other people, and that's never good for anybody.
Look, Drew, in this example you gave, it's interesting. You were looking at something outside to fix you inside, and in return, you blame something outside for not fixing you inside.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm looking outward, pointing a finger of blame outside of me for causing me to feel a particular way, that's a good sign that I'm probably looking at things outside of me to accomplish what it's impossible for them to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Drew. All about contentment, isn't it?
Buddy, we just need to learn to be like our dogs.
Oh, we do.
Like your dogs, man, I got the best life. Getting
No,
scratched. I got the best daddy.
I don't do that. I don't like the daddy business.
Not your fur baby.
Yeah,
Out here.
he's more like a person than a dog. I've got I know anyone listening, I have my 20-pound Jack Russell in my lap, and he's my diabetes service dog. Incredibly smart, but he sits around all the time and paws me, wanting me to do something instead of sit here and work. So he's all the time after me. So I get him up in my lap a couple of times a day, and when I can take a break or get something done with him here. In the Jonathan Starr, he had a line I thought that was really good, or a couple. The people must take death seriously and not waste their lives in distant lands. Taking death seriously. I wouldn't have thought of that phrase. And then I got to thinking about it, and maybe we could think of that as our ongoing death to self, because that's really what we're talking about here. Don't waste our lives in outward pursuits that don't bring freedom from myself. The next, let them return to the knotting of cord. Let them enjoy their food and take care of their clothing. Let them be content with their homes and joyful in the way they live. Joyful in the way they live, not in what they have or what they have planned. Even though you can have all those things and go places, that's not what brings the joy. The knotting of cord was a way in ancient times to count, to keep record. They used knots and cord for that. That could hint toward accumulation. So I thought that was good that he brought the taking death seriously. Do we take our lives seriously? Do we know where to look? Do we know where death occurs? Distant lands is not where death occurs. Death occurs within, right?
Spirit.
The distant lands are not going to affect my death as far as that goes. We could not be taking death seriously if our travel, let's say we were taking risks in life. Maybe one thing he's talking about, I don't know, that doesn't do much for me.
I see that line of thinking is knowing that everything is temporary.
Oh, good.
You know,
Thank you, Drew. Yeah.
you can acquire all this stuff, but you can't take it with you. And you also never know when death is going to come for you.
Yeah.
How would you spend today if it was your last day? Would you spend it trying to make an extra $1 million, or spend 3/4 of it on an airplane and going through different airports? Or would you spend it just with your loved ones, eating a home cooked meal, relaxing with your friends, enjoying their company? That's what I'd rather do.
That's good, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Be content with what you have, who you are, your relationships. And I still have more work to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Maybe I could say it this way. I have more surrendering to do.
Render to do.
That would be a better way to say that. Oscar?
Yeah, I took death very lightly in times of addiction. Very lightly. I didn't care. I didn't care about anything. I had 3 times an OD and I came out of it and still kept on using. Still, I'm not afraid of death, but I regained respect for life. And for me, that's taking death seriously is actually respecting life, to unfold itself, to be there in it, to be a part of it, to be a witness of it, to live it. We are alive until we die. After that, we don't know. So that's what resonated. Thanks.
Thanks, Oscar. Any other comments, guys, before we close? It's been a good discussion today. Thank you. Guys, thanks for being here. Good conversation. Hope to see you next week. Thank you. Hello, this is Buddy C. I wanted to make you aware of several recovery-related resources that I've posted in the episode description. These resources include a list of recovery podcasts, a free sober meditation app, daily recovery email, shared Google Recovery calendars. Hope you put some of these resources to use and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends in recovery.